Hello! For the next 19 minutes, I am going to talk to you about the history and the mechanics of utility vehicles. These are just dry, technical facts about how things move across uneven ground. Use this to settle in and relax. While we go through this, you are looking at footage from a game called Over the Hills. It is a demo version, and you can find it on Steam if you want to look at the project. Let us talk about the machine itself. When we look at the history of these vehicles, we have to talk about the Willys MB. Most people know it as the Jeep. It is widely considered the first official mass-produced vehicle designed specifically to operate where roads did not exist. Before the Willys, if you wanted to move a heavy load over rough terrain, you used a horse or a very specialized tractor. You did not use a passenger car. The problem with using a passenger car on rough ground is simple. It is built to be comfortable on flat, hard surfaces. It has a complex suspension, a low center of gravity, and a drivetrain that expects perfect traction. The Willys MB changed that because it was built for the military in the 1940s. It was designed to be lightweight, to have a very short wheelbase, which is the distance between the front and rear wheels, and to have four-wheel drive. But even with four-wheel drive, the designers faced a critical issue: the differential. A differential is a gear system that allows the left and right wheels to rotate at different speeds. This is necessary for cornering on pavement, as the outer wheel must travel a longer path than the inner wheel. However, when a vehicle loses traction on a loose surface, the differential directs all power toward the path of least resistance. If one wheel enters a patch of mud or loses contact with the ground, that wheel will spin freely, while the wheel with grip remains stationary. The mechanical design of an open differential does not force both wheels to turn equally, which causes the vehicle to remain stationary despite the engine providing power. Engineers needed a way to override this. They sought a mechanism that could force both axles to rotate at a uniform speed, effectively bypassing the differential's natural tendency to favor the wheel with the least grip. This led to the development of locking differentials, which create a rigid connection between the wheels to ensure consistent movement across challenging terrain. The first official civilian version, the CJ2A, came right after the war in 1945. It was based on the Willys MB, with modifications such as a tailgate for cargo utility. It retained the same frame and engine architecture as the military version. When you were in the driver's seat of one of those early models, you were managing the transfer case, the gearbox that distributes power to the front and rear axles. It produced a distinctive, high-pitched mechanical whine, signifying the drivetrain under load. The designers understood that increasing the vehicle's mass would cause it to sink into soft surfaces, while excessive rigidity would lead to structural failure. Every component was calculated for efficiency. They utilized a simple L-head engine. It was not defined by high power output, but by a flat torque curve. This allowed the vehicle to generate consistent pulling power at very low engine speeds, which is a requirement for climbing over obstacles. In the 1940s, tire technology was limited. The tires were narrow and lacked the flexible rubber compounds used today. To maintain grip, the designers implemented aggressive tread patterns, similar to those found on agricultural equipment. These large lugs were designed to displace mud and bite into yielding soil. Steering was a manual, heavy process. Every rock and root encountered on a trail was transferred directly through the steering column to the driver's hands. It required constant, deliberate attention to wheel placement and careful handling of the steering wheel to avoid injury from feedback. This direct mechanical feedback was a core feature of the design. There were no electronic assists or computerized torque management systems. It was a purely mechanical operation involving the driver, the steering linkage, and the terrain. These early utility vehicles were tools analogous to industrial hand tools designed to function in harsh environments. Their reliability was a result of this mechanical simplicity. Beyond their logistical brilliance, these vehicles became the Swiss Army knives of the front lines. It wasn't uncommon for crews to use the Jeep's power takeoff to run everything from circular saws for bridge building to generators for field radios. There's even a famous, albeit anecdotal, account of a unit in Italy that managed to rig a Jeep's engine to a washing machine to clean their uniforms, proving that even in the heat of battle, the quest for a clean shirt is universal. The name itself, Jeep, became a permanent part of the lexicon. While some argue it was a phonetic slur of the general purpose or GP designation, many believe it was named after Eugene the Jeep, a magical creature from the Popeye comic strip that could go anywhere, solve any problem, and was described as small and elusive. By 1941, the name was as legendary as the machine's agility. For the drivers, the reality was often darker. They frequently performed the blackout driving technique, navigating treacherous, crater-filled terrain at night with all lights masked to avoid enemy detection. Drivers had to rely on a tiny, downward-facing, diffused glow that barely lit the ground ahead. It turned every trail into a test of pure memory and terrain-reading intuition. If you lost your place in the dark, you were effectively driving blind. To understand the true nature of off-roading, you have to look at how these early mechanics forced a symbiotic relationship between man and machine. Because there were no electronic locking differentials or traction control systems to save you from a mistake, the driver's line was a matter of survival. If you found yourself on a muddy incline, you couldn't simply floor the accelerator. Doing so would only churn the earth into a slurry and bury the axles. Instead, you had to master the momentum of the crawl. You would approach an obstacle with steady, low gear torque, listening to the engine's rhythm. If the engine pitch deepened, a sign the load was too great, you had to intuitively adjust your throttle to keep the wheels biting without spinning. It was a sensory experience. The smell of the hot oil, the vibration of the drivetrain through the floorboards, and the precise, heavy feedback of the steering wheel telling you exactly how much grip you had left on the rocks. This mechanical intimacy extended to the field fix. In 1944, there were no roadside assistance services or specialized recovery shops. If a Jeep high-centered on a log or buried itself in a river crossing, the solution was kinetic and cooperative. Because the vehicle was engineered with such a low curb weight, it was common for a crew of 3 or 4 soldiers to simply jump out, grab the bumpers, and physically lift the machine back onto solid ground. This wasn't just manual labor. It was a testament to the design's philosophy that the vehicle was an extension of the infantry, not a separate asset. Beyond the physical operation, there was a profound shift in how the military viewed terrain. Before the MB, terrain was an obstacle to be bypassed. After the MB, it became a path to be exploited. The vehicle's short wheelbase and narrow track allowed it to navigate between trees in dense forests or climb slopes that were previously considered impossible for wheeled transport. This changed the doctrine of war entirely. Suddenly, a reconnaissance team could move through a swamp or a dense thicket, flank an enemy position, and retreat before the opposition even realized the ground was traversable. This is the origin of the off-road culture we see today. The thrill of conquering a trail in a modern computer-assisted SUV is merely an echo of that 1940s necessity. When you drive today, you are utilizing systems built to mimic the mechanical genius of the original Willys. The transfer case that provides low-range gearing for climbing, the approach angles designed to clear obstacles, and the rugged, solid axle suspension that prioritizes reliability over comfort. The difference is that while you might be sitting in a climate-controlled cabin with a screen showing you the horizon, the driver of an MB in 1944 was feeling the horizon through the soles of their boots and the tension in their arms. They weren't just driving, they were reading the geology of the world to stay alive. As the decades rolled on, the raw, visceral simplicity of the Willys MB began to evolve. The post-war era transformed the Jeep from a battlefield tool into a civilian workhorse. Farmers and laborers didn't need artillery towing. They needed power for plows, sawmills, and generators. This transition gave birth to the CJ, or Civilian Jeep series. It retained the indestructible soul of the MB, but it started to whisper the word comfort. Interestingly, the path to this off-road gold standard began long before the Jeep arrived. In the early 1900s, an inventor named Adolph Congress developed the Congress track, fitting flexible caterpillar belts to the rear of standard cars. These half-tracks could traverse terrain that would swallow a normal tire, proving that spreading a vehicle's weight was the secret to conquering the wild, a concept that directly informs the massive, aggressive tires we see on specialized off-road rigs today. By the 1970s and 80s, this evolution accelerated. Off-roading shifted from a necessity of work to a hobby of passion. The vehicles grew larger, and the industry saw the birth of the three-wheeled ATV, most notably the Honda ATC 90, which became a pop culture icon through appearances in films and television. While safety concerns eventually led to the four-wheeled dominance we see today, those early strange machines proved that people were hungry for adventure, not just utility. Then, the true revolution arrived, the digital age. It is worth noting that while we often think of electronic stability control as a modern safety feature, its roots are surprisingly complex. In 1971, Buick introduced MaxTrack, an early computer system that could detect rear-wheel spin and cut engine power. It was years ahead of its time, though it wasn't designed for crawling boulders. It was designed to keep full-sized luxury sedans from sliding in the rain. Today, that same concept has been refined into sophisticated terrain management systems, where a computer calculates traction thousands of times per second. The transition from purely mechanical systems to modern computer-assisted off-roading changed the fundamental handshake between driver and terrain. Where once you had to manually judge your throttle to avoid spinning a tire, modern electronic traction control systems now do the thinking for you. Sensors monitor wheel slip in milliseconds, applying individual brakes to keep you moving. Modern locking differentials are no longer just mechanical levers you yank. They are often button press operations. We have moved from feeling the terrain through a heavy steering column to seeing through the hood using high-definition cameras, such as Land Rover's ClearSight Ground View. We no longer just listen to the engine. We receive real-time data on incline angles, tire pressure, and drivetrain temperatures on massive glass-covered displays. Yet, despite this flood of technology, the core Jeep DNA remains. When you look at a modern top-tier off-roader, you see the ghosts of the Willys MB. You see the same commitment to approach angles, the same focus on ground clearance, and the same rigid axle philosophy that prioritizes durability over aesthetic polish. We have added climate control and safety cages, but the objective is identical to what those engineers in 1940 chased: to create a machine that ignores the limitations of the map. Today, we have traded the physical fatigue of the 1940s driver for a different kind of challenge, learning to trust the invisible hand of the computer while still maintaining that ancient, hard-earned human intuition. We are still reading the Earth, but now we have a digital translator sitting in the dashboard. It is the final step in an 85-year journey, from a bare metal crate on a battlefield to a high-tech command center in the wilderness. The tools have changed, but the spirit of the machine, the stubborn human urge to go where the road ends, remains completely unchanged. As we look ahead, this 85-year journey faces its most significant shift yet: the electrification of the drivetrain. The internal combustion engine, which defined the off-road experience from the Go Devil to the modern V8, is being replaced by instant torque electric motors. It is a strange full-circle moment. Early enthusiasts might fear this shift, but from a purely mechanical standpoint, it is the final evolution of the crawl. It is a fascinating shift when you consider some of the weirder experiments in history. Take, for instance, the flying Jeep of the 1940s, the Convair Model 118. Engineers actually tried to create a road-legal vehicle that could detach its wings and tail to become an off-roader. But it ended in disaster during a test flight when the pilot ran out of fuel and had to crash land in a parking lot. Or consider the Russian ZIL-2-906, a screw-propelled vehicle that used two massive corkscrew-like pontoons instead of wheels. It could swim through snow, mud, and swamp by literally boring its way forward like a drill bit. It was terrifying, bizarre, and proof that humanity has always been obsessed with finding a way to touch parts of the Earth that simply don't want to be touched. There is a poetic irony in this current transition to electric power. We started with the minimalist, lightweight Willys, and as we moved into the digital era, our vehicles became heavy, complex, and crowded with screens. Now, by removing the heavy engine, complex transmission, and fuel tanks, we are returning to a form of mechanical simplicity that echoes the original design philosophy. Speaking of simplicity, there is the odd reality of the Jeep's original patent, which was so broad it included the ability for the vehicle to function as a tractor, a boat, and even a mobile command center. It was almost prophetic. We are now seeing V2L, or vehicle-to-load technology, where modern electric trucks act as massive portable batteries that can power an entire campsite, a house, or even another stranded electric vehicle for days. Ultimately, the future of off-roading will be defined by how we balance this newfound power. The tools will continue to change, but the spirit of the machine remains unchanged. It is still that restless urge to see what lies over the next horizon. Whether powered by gasoline or electricity, the vehicle remains a bridge between the world we know and the world we are desperate to discover. The road ends, but the journey does not.